There are moments when you come to pray, and no words rise. You sit there still, uncertain, waiting for something to stir inside. But all you hear is the quiet. And maybe you've asked yourself, is this even prayer? Does God hear this? The noise of the world trains us to fill every space with sound. But the sacred does the opposite. It invites you to fall silent, to tremble, to not know what to say and still be held. You've been taught that prayer must have shape, that it needs the right words, the right tone, the right moment. But here you are, wordless and weary, and something in you still reaches. That's enough. It always was. There's a silence that doesn't signal absence, but nearness. A quiet so deep, so unforced, that only love could fill it. What if your stillness is already speaking? What if the ache that brought you here is the prayer? You don't need perfect words. You don't even need any words. Just your willing heart, your fragile yes, your silent staying. In this sacred hush, He is closer than breath, not waiting to be impressed, but simply welcomed. So stay, even without the script. Even if all you can offer is quiet, it counts. He listens differently than we think. And in that silence, everything is already being said. Maybe you felt it, that subtle shame when your prayers feel small. When others speak with eloquence and you can barely whisper, help. When your heart is full but your mouth stays quiet. When the best you can do is cry in the dark. And you wonder, is this enough? Am I enough? Let me say this gently. Yes, you are. You don't need to impress heaven with beautiful language. You don't need to recite perfect theology. You don't need to be strong today. You just need to be real. The most honest prayers often have no form. They're messy, unedited, simple. And that simplicity doesn't disqualify you. It draws God closer. Because He doesn't need a speech. He needs surrender. And your tired sigh, your broken pleas, your quiet, I don't know how. They move His heart more than you realize. You were never meant to earn His attention. You already have it, right here, as you are. There's room at the altar for those who don't know what to say. Room for hesitant hearts, for trembling hands, for silent seekers. And you belong there too. So breathe. Let go of the need to get it right. God isn't grading your prayers. He's receiving your heart. And if that truth speaks to you, if this space feels like what your soul has been needing, 5, a place to be real, to be quiet, to be gently reminded that you're not too late and never too little, then stay close. Subscribe to Calm Called, so when the next whisper of peace comes, it finds you ready to receive it. You've been there, kneeling, reaching, aching, and yet unable to speak. Not because you don't believe, but because something inside you is too deep for words. Too raw, too real, too sacred to name. It's the groan you carry in silence, the ache behind your eyes, the heaviness that won't lift, even when you try to explain it. And here's what you need to know. God hears that too. He hears the cries that never leave your throat. He understands the language of pain, of longing, of surrender without sound. Romans speaks of groanings too deep for words, whispers of the Spirit that intercede for us. Because some prayers don't rise from the mouth, they rise from the soul. So if today your voice feels broken, if your heart is tired of trying, if you feel like you have nothing left to say, let that be your offering. Stillness isn't empty. It's full of what only heaven can interpret. And your silence? It's already speaking. This is the turning, not from pain to perfection, but from pressure to presence, from trying harder to trusting deeper. You're not failing in prayer. You're unfolding in it. And what can't be said can still be heard. So stay with me, because where we're going next, you'll see how even the smallest, simplest moments can become sacred ground. We often imagine altars as grand, dramatic, made of fire and gold and thunder. But heaven doesn't need drama to see devotion. God notices the altar built in your kitchen at 6 a.m. When you whisper, "God, help me get through this day," He sees the one built in your car, when you cry at a red light and still go forward anyway. The sacred doesn't wait for ceremony. It enters the unfiltered, unplanned, and unseen. Every time you choose compassion over bitterness, every time you give your last bit of patience, every time you breathe deep instead of lashing out, you build an altar. These are your sacred stones, small, unpolished, laid down one by one through the years. Think back. How many moments have you dismissed as just life, when in truth they were holy ground? The sigh over the stove, the exhausted yes to a child, the holding of a tongue when it burned to speak, the simple thank you through clenched teeth. None of it goes unnoticed, not in the kingdom of the God who sees in secret. You don't need to stage your spirituality. You're already living it. Every small act of faithfulness, no matter how quiet, echoes into eternity. There's something so healing in knowing this. God doesn't weigh the beauty of your worship by the volume of your words. He treasures what you offer in the in-between moments, the ones no one claps for, the ones that cost you something small but sacred. So maybe today, the altar is your breath, your pause, your decision not to give up. And if that's all you have, that is more than enough. The ordinary becomes holy, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. And heaven draws near to that kind of honesty. Even now, you're building something eternal, with hands you thought were too tired. In a world that demands performance, God asks for something far more vulnerable: permission. Not your polish, not your plan, not your perfect morning routine, just your presence. Because what He desires most is your heart, not cleaned up, not composed, just open. We often come to God thinking we need to present something worthy, a better version of ourselves, a more spiritual vocabulary, a less messy faith. But what if the truth is this? He's never once asked you to impress Him. He's only asked you to include Him. Think of the tabernacle, a place not for display but for dwelling. God always preferred nearness over spectacle. And the same is true with you. He doesn't want the best version of you. He wants the true one, the one who's still learning, the one who hesitates, the one who loves deeply but still feels lost. You may not have the right words. You may not even know how to begin, but your willingness is a door that heaven never ignores. God can do more with your raw surrender than your rehearsed perfection. Because when you let Him in, not just into your praise, but into your doubt, your grief, your silence, that's when real intimacy begins. It's not the volume of your prayers that reaches God's heart. It's the authenticity behind them. Even a hesitant yes echoes like thunder in the throne room. So release the pressure to perform. Unclench the need to prove. The deepest form of prayer may be as simple as sitting with Him, unmasked and unafraid. Let that be the offering today. Not more striving, not more doing, just being. Because once you realize that your heart, just as it is, has always been enough, everything changes. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey, 0-5, when the weight of trying begins to crack. When you realize that no matter how much you polish, perform, or push, it's never been about perfection. This is that moment. It's the holy unraveling, where striving gives way to surrender, where the myth of needing to get it right finally breaks open, to reveal something deeper. Your imperfection was never in the way. It was the invitation. We've been told for so long to fix ourselves before coming to God. But what if He was in the mess the whole time, not waiting for you to clean it up, but waiting for you to let Him into it? You're human. You hesitate. You get it wrong. You forget what He said last week and need reminding again today. And yet, He doesn't flinch. Because grace was never dependent on your consistency. It flows in your lack. It finds the cracks. It fills what you think disqualifies you. Think of the potter. His hands don't reject the clay for being soft or uneven. That's the point. It must be pliable. It must yield. It must stay close to the wheel. And so must you. Not perfect, but willing. Not polished, but present. You are not called to flawless prayers. You're called to faithful ones. Even when your voice trembles, even when your spirit is low, even when you wonder if it's working. Your imperfection is not a curse. It's the condition in which mercy moves best. Because in your weakness, His strength shows up without resistance. So here, right now, release it. The pressure, the performance, the illusion that He only meets the put together. Let your flaws be seen. Let your gaps be filled. Let your shaky yes be more than enough. You are holy, not because you're flawless, but because He's near. There's a quiet question lingering beneath the surface, one that every soul eventually must face. And it sounds like this: am I enough just like this? Not once you've figured it out. Not after you've learned how to say all the right things. Not once you've mastered spiritual discipline. But right now, as you are. That question doesn't demand a theological answer. It demands something braver. A pause, a breath, a willingness to be seen. Because deep down, you want to know, can I come without knowing what to say? Can I show up with trembling hands and a heart that's still unsure? Can I be willing without a script? And the answer, the one you may not have heard enough, is yes. Absolutely yes. God is not moved by polish. He's moved by presence. Not performance, but posture. Not rehearsed faith, but real faith. The kind that still shows up, even when it doesn't know how. Think of Moses. He doubted his words, tried to disqualify himself. But God didn't ask for eloquence, only obedience. Think of Mary. No training, no script, just a yes that changed history. That's the invitation. Not to recite, but to receive. Not to have the answers, but to stay willing. Because a heart that stays open is a doorway for the divine. And willingness, even shaky, unsure, whispering willingness, is holy ground. So today, release the fear that your words must be perfect. Let go of the belief that your offering has to look a certain way. You're not memorizing a role. You're entering a relationship, one where silence is welcome, tears are understood, and hesitation is not a hindrance, but a beginning. If all you can say is, "I'm here," that's enough. If all you can pray is help, He hears it as if it were a psalm. You don't need a script, just a soft yes, a surrendered breath, and the courage to stay. Over time, prayer can become something we do, a task, a formula, a checklist of words we hope sound spiritual enough. But what if it was never meant to sound impressive? What if the deepest prayer isn't spoken 0, 3, but felt, lived? Because prayer isn't a performance. It's a posture, one of leaning softly, vulnerably into someone stronger. There is a language older than words, one spoken by the soul, long before we ever learned how to say amen. It's the language of trust. You spoke it when you got up after failing, when you showed up in the quiet again, when you chose to breathe instead of break, when you whispered, "Still I believe." These are prayers, and they carry weight in the invisible. They tilt heaven's ear, because they come not from the mouth, but from the marrow. Maybe today, God isn't asking you to speak more. Maybe He's asking you to lean in again, to come without pressure, to rest without guilt, to trade your recital for rest. You're striving for surrender. You're allowed to pray with your life, with your posture, with the way you show up, tired, imperfect, and still open. Even Jesus, in Gethsemane, didn't offer polished words. He offered pain, sweat, honesty, and that was enough. So today, let your prayer be this: I trust you even here. I trust you even now. And trust, once spoken, echoes long after the voice is silent. It lingers. It shifts the atmosphere. It holds the soul in place when everything else moves. Prayer is not about how much you say. It's about how fully you yield. And trust is the bridge that carries you back, again and again, to the heart of God. Sometimes, in our search for spiritual growth, we forget the things we once knew without effort. The way a child knows how to reach for a parent's hand, the way a heart knows how to ache without explanation. You already know how to pray. You always did. long before you learned the formulas, before you memorized verses, before you were told how to approach God. You were already speaking with Him. As a child, when you looked at the stars and felt small, that was a prayer. When you said thank you before a meal, even without fully knowing who you were thanking, that was a prayer. When you stood by a hospital bed, unable to say anything but please, that was a prayer. When you walked away from something toxic, tired and trembling but determined, that was a prayer too. Prayer is not always learned. Often, it's remembered. It's the soul's original language. And sometimes, to pray well is simply to return to that language, to reclaim what has always been inside you. You don't have to find the words. You've been praying with your choices, your tears, your steps forward. 0, 6, and maybe that's what God is gently reminding you of now, that you're not starting over. You're simply coming home. Prayer is not reserved for the polished, or the confident, or the ones who seem spiritually strong. It's for the broken, the wandering, the wondering, the ones who dare to speak or simply sit in God's presence. So release the pressure to be impressive. You already carry what you need. You already carry Him. And when all else fails, let this truth root deep inside. The God you're trying to reach has already been walking beside you. Looking back over this journey, the silence, the ache, the doubt, the fragile prayers, a quiet truth emerges. It was never about perfect words, never about flawless faith. It was always about one thing: your yes. That sacred whisper in your spirit, the one you gave Him when you had nothing else to offer. The yes that came through tears, the yes that came even when your hands trembled. You may not have realized it at the time, but that yes was everything. It still is. God doesn't need your polish. He doesn't need your speeches. He needs your permission to enter, to stay, to carry you. Your smallest surrender has opened the greatest door. And while you were worried about getting it right, He was already drawing near. This is the sacred synthesis, the quiet revelation that everything mattered. The silence, the stumbles, the soul-deep groanings, they were never wasted. Because God listens differently, He receives differently, and all along, He was looking not for performance, but for permission. Think of every biblical moment that shifted history. They didn't begin with clarity. They began with surrender, with someone simply saying, "Yes, Lord." It's the softest words that change the hardest hearts, the smallest gestures that welcome the biggest miracles. And now, you stand in that same stream, not needing to impress, but only to continue, to keep showing up, to keep breathing prayers you can't fully name, to keep offering your honest, unfinished heart. And as you do, He meets you in ways that cannot be explained, only experienced. You have not failed. You have not missed it. You have not been disqualified. Your yes was heard, and it still echoes. So now, you can exhale. There's nothing left to prove, nothing you need to earn. You've offered what matters most, your heart. And even if your prayers were quiet, even if your thoughts wandered, even if you never found the right words, He listened. He always listens, not to performance, but to presence. You came here wondering if silence could speak, if simplicity disqualified you, if your soul was still allowed to be heard. And the answer, again and again, is yes. Yes, beloved one. You are heard. You are seen. You are still welcome here. Even in silence. Even in weakness. Especially there. So now, we breathe together. We close the striving. And we simply pray.